The mathematical-minded of you may have noticed that if you want to create a sound using additive synthesis and all 128 partials with a large number of envelopes, then there would be literally thousands of parameters to adjust. Well, this is one of the reasons why additive synthesis is described as difficult to program. There is no need to stress about this with Morphine. Morphine provides a method that is known as synthesis to create additive sounds. To describe resynthesis, I'm going to first start with a short description of sampling. Sampling is just taking a series of snapshots of sound at a given evenly time-space interval. You aren't using the sampler to recreate the sound, but the illusion of it, by giving it as short of a time interval as you can. This is essentially as similar as watching a movie, where you're actually only watching a series of still frames to make it look like a moving image. Resynthesis works in a similar fashion. Instead of only producing a series of snapshots of the sound, it creates a series of breakpoints at regular intervals and then using Morphine's envelopes to morph between them. This effectively recreates the sound. But instead of using a sampler, it is using an additive synthesizer to do all the work. Firstly, you have to charge your sample. This is done by clicking the Charge SMP button in the Resynthesis panel. This then brings up a browser that allows you to load up either aiff files or WAV files. This works best with dry samples, and if you're only importing one sample, then it will be best for you to aim for a sample that is around C5. Once you have a sample loaded, you can then attempt to match the sound by using the tuning functions. If you're familiar with sample, this works in the same way as adjusting the root note of a sample. The tuning control works in semitones, but if you need to adjust the pitch on a smaller scale, the detune option allows you to adjust the pitch in cents. Using this dial here, you can compare the original sound with the additive synthesis sound. Moving this dial fully left will give you the wave's file sound, and moving it right will give you the sound played back through additive synthesis. You can hear the difference in the timbre of the sound itself. Once you are happy with the sound, you can then select the Import Charge Sample option from the Spectrum drop-down menu. Then a new series of breakpoints will be created in the Spectrum panel. The density of breakpoints can be adjusted using the resolution setting in the Resynthesis panel. The higher the resolution you set, the more dense the breakpoints become. Note that as you increase the resolution of the breakpoints, then so do you also increase the load on your computer's processor. You can of course import different samples for each keyboard zone that you want to set up. To set up a new keyboard zone, you can right-click or alt-click on the keyboard zone section. The vertical axis determines the amplitude of that keyboard zone, and the horizontal axis determines the split points for the notes. Now that you are familiar with the generators and the ways in which you can work with them, it's time to mix things up a bit and bring in some of the other features of Morphine. As you can see, there are 4 individual generators, allowing you to layer 4 sounds to create one individual patch. Morph panel allows you to manipulate the volume levels of each generator over time, so that the sound will literally morph between them. Morph does this by using a 2-dimensional representation of 3-dimensional parameters. And this is done with these 3 windows here. You can see this white square here, and this represents point 0, or the position that the sound starts at. If I move this around this area here, it'll change the start sound by layering the 4 generators according to the positioning of the white square. If I position it centrally, then all sounds will have equal weight in the morph. As I move the square around, the sound will morph between the various sounds. I can add a new node by right or alt-clicking anywhere in this section. Again, you can change its position to change the sound. You'll also notice that the new nodes have appeared in these two sections, and these ensure the position in the timeline that the morph envelope is at. The nodes above the line and below the line can be used to adjust the x and y coordinate of the node in this section here, with the timeline showing on the third axis. Similar to the envelopes I have looked at in an earlier chapter, this morph can have loop points and can be tempo synced. You can also adjust the time of the envelope according to the velocity or the pitch of the note struck. You can also see in this section that there are a few extra mixing controls that allow you to mute, solo, and pan, or simply control the volume of the generators. This ends the chapter of resynthesis in the morph panel. In the next section, we'll take a closer look at the modulation panel and how this can be used to further control your sounds.